Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude BeyondMystic, and welcome to tonight's edition of A Break in the Clouds with our guests, Penny Kelly and Julie from Maison Jupiter. You can find, of course, Penny at Penny Kelly here on YouTube and also on the web at pennykelly.com. Penny, welcome back to the show.
Hi, good to be here.
I'm excited
Yeah.
to have you. And folks, say hello to Julie from Maison Jupiter here on YouTube and also on the web at maisonjupiter.com. Julie, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Good. I'm doing good. Hello, JC. Hello, Penny. It's a
Hi.
pleasure to be here with you tonight as well.
I'm excited to have you guys on because if you guys have been watching commentators for the last week, you kind of understand that there seems to be a big consensus going on here. And to sum it all up, maybe I'll quote Bill Holter, who was on Greg Hunter's show last week, and he said, "Yeah, we're a couple of weeks away from the whole shit house coming down." So, with that said, thank you everyone for joining us here tonight. We're going to try to unmuddy the waters and try to figure out what's happening in this crazy world of ours. Of course, we'll bring up your comments as we go, and if we have time a little bit later on the show, we'll also take some questions from you guys. Now, I wanted to invite you guys to go to Penny's YouTube channel just a couple of days. She uploaded the Look-See on October 15. Really interesting video, guys. It kind of lays out part of the conversation we're going to have tonight, but what just happened also live, hot off the press. Penny did another Look-See late last night, and she's going to share some of that with us here today, live for the first time as a scoop on Beyond Mystic.
Yay.
Penny, the floor is yours. Where do you want to start with this? You want to kind of just recap a little bit the October 15 one so people get situated, and then we'll get into your latest update as well, okay?
Okay. Yeah, I think probably the big focus for the October 15th one actually was the coup. I kept seeing this coup happening, or I guess I'll call it a 180-degree turnaround somewhere before Christmas. Okay, we'll call it the turnaround. Coup that might be one of the words I was told not to use. I'm not sure.
Could be a bad word, yes.
Part of the C words you're not supposed to use. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, right. So there were that. And then I did this deep look at the financial thing. I wanted this nice, clean crash. Neat. Okay, all done. Let's move on. Everybody knows what we should be doing with our money. It's all clear. That isn't what I saw at all. And so I was really disappointed about that. And then I brought up these three pieces in the economy. One was PayPal. One was the amount of debt that the banks have, $2 quadrillion in debt. And that was like, oh. And the other was this question about not just BlackRock. Since that whole thing about BlackRock being bankrupt, I saw another thing that said Vanguard had also filed. And I was like, what? Why? How is that true? Is somebody pulling our leg? So those were the big focuses. And then right at the very end, I had some news about the Nord Stream pipeline, which was, oh my God, they screwed up. Somebody screwed up. Whoever was down there planting bombs put two of the bombs on one pipe instead of one bomb on each of the four pipes. So one pipe.
You're going to blow up the algorithms with that one alone, Penny. That's a tough one.
I'll tell you what.
Of course, everything Penny's just saying now was all debunked. You guys can go watch Snopes. They did their due diligence. And none of that happened, of course. And Biden never said, this was going to happen as if he knew it was going to be perpetrated by them. Nobody ever said that, folks. Move along. Nothing to see.
Okay.
Okay.
It's like, well, how come we're not hearing anything about those pipes anymore? And it's like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Screwed up everybody's narrative.
Yep.
So so I think we're in a really intense and interesting time, and we really have some potential for change. That is the piece that excites me. It's like
me too. I think through all of this, there's huge potential for humanity to take back the reins on their sovereignty. Right. And I think that's what's exciting. It's also scary for a lot of people. And I think the fear of the unknown is also very scary for everyone. And this is the point of having these shows, bringing the different points of views together to build a bigger tableau as to perhaps how all this is
Right.
going to unfold so that we can navigate it better together. So a big thank you
Yeah.
for everyone in the chat also sharing their opinions and their thoughts on all of this. That's what it's all about, sharing information. So Penny, do you want to start now with the update you had last night? Do you want to go there?
Yeah,
Let's do
there's a
that.
couple things, and then I'll kind of weave back and forth between the two.
Okay, very good.
Okay. So last night's look-see is just a straight look-see. I had said I'm going to mix in some news and look to see what does that tell me about where we're going and how we should move ahead, could move ahead, ought to at least think about moving ahead. So the one last night was just straight look-see. In fact, I was already in bed. I was relaxing. I was thinking, well, what's going on in the world? And I'm just letting stuff roll through. And all of a sudden, I hear this voice. And I have been thinking about the elections, musing about the elections. And I heard this voice. And I'll just read what I wrote here. It was an election official talking to someone on election night about the numbers coming in. And the voice said, quote, "We can't overcome those numbers without raising serious flags, the risk of discovery and potential challenges." And whoever he was talking to said, "Do it anyway. Pull out all the stops." And the attitude that came from that "do it anyway" kind of command was one of desperation. And what was communicated in that were also the thoughts of that individual. And those thoughts were not so good. It was, we will fix it later. We'll pay whoever. We'll kill whoever. We'll lie. We'll cover, because we can't lose power right now. And I was so shocked at that. I thought, okay, I have to write this down. And I think we're headed into an election that's, there was a little other piece later on in the look-see last night, and it was that the bad boys, the bad people, the people who aren't so nice, are really getting scared. They're really scared, and there's some of them are starting to like try to disappear. They're scattering, and there was a piece in there in which they were trying to discuss, okay, what'll happen if we just leave the election alone? Could we move forward quietly, without a hassle, without anybody coming after us, if we just leave the election alone? And in the end, they decided to focus on just a couple of states. And I thought those states were California and Texas. But in Texas, they got caught red-handed. So somebody in Texas was literally adjusting the numbers and got caught. And so those are big states in the US for the number of senators and representatives, because they have a lot of people, California and Texas. And so it looked like there was enough uproar that they then said, no, we can't call the election, just from those two states. So we'll see how that actually unfolds. My gut about the whole thing was that the people trying to manipulate the election are not sure they can get away with it. They're not sure that they can not fiddle with it, and they don't know what to do. And so they may end up doing something stupid right at the last minute.
That's interesting here. Somebody in the chat is saying, yes, we're all feeling the bad guys' energy, their dread, and we're thinking it's our dread, but no, it's their dread we're feeling. Right. Cliff High was saying that on one of his last video also, that they're pretty much, they know, okay, there's a couple of things going on here. So first of all, their plans are not maybe going as fast or as well as they thought it would. And on top of that, there's astrology that seems to suggest that the energies are not backing them. They're actually backing the decentralized forces of Aquarius. This is the world we're moving into. So they know they're on the time clock here. Well, we might get back to that a little bit here. We'll choose some of our scary words here. But going back to E-Day, so let's look at for tonight's episode, we're going to call that the eclipse of November 8th. Okay, so this is the astrological
very good
there. 107 was doing the rounds last week too, and he's also of the opinion that we might not have an E-day, or if we do, that we might not have results also. And he's saying how we're basically in this weird period where we know both sides are going to strike. We don't know
Yeah.
when they're going to strike, how they're going to strike, but when
Right.
they do, the dominoes that fall after that is anybody's guess. Like it's going to be, wow,
That's right.
what the hell just happened, right? And so
Yep.
he was pegging the date. And again, he says, don't hold me to the date. And I'm just saying, astrologically speaking, with all the events happening right now, he was looking at October 29 as a date where perhaps we would see some type of engagement or some type of, at least here in mainstream news, that something's not right in our realm. Of course, the people watching this show know that shit ain't right. But for the rest of the people here, they might know somewhere around the 29th. I thought that was interesting. And I'll see if
Okay.
I can bring up this other poster here, but I believe you and I had talked about this, Penny. But this is the last one of the last rallies from Mr. T. And what was interesting about the flag here, semaphore, is that word for sending signals using flags. And so for a
That's
lot of people, this meant the sharing of this flag here as a symbol meant that we had now moved into a new phase of, I'll just say, the skirmish, to not say the W word. So this
okay.
skirmish now, per maybe the white hats or the sock who this person might be speaking for, is now going into the open, meaning that the general population would actually realize that we were all involved in this big world skirmish, even though the mainstream media has not really said that yet.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Because you're talking about the C, you know, one of the C things, or this big replacement. How do you tie that in perhaps with what 107 was saying, that we're soon to see moves in the open here? How does that tie into some of your look-sees and perhaps some of the older ones also, in terms of this big 180 turnaround you're talking about? Share with that with the
Yeah.
audience, or watch some of the words if you can.
Let's see. How do we talk without talking? We
I
need to
know,
be.
right? Somebody just said, JC, you should just do this on Rumble. I'm like, I know, probably. Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So one of the things that I have seen is that, and I've seen it repeatedly, is that there comes a point where the whole thing comes out in the open.
Mm.
And there's a lot of shock from people who are on the fence. And there's a lot of, I told you so, from the people who have known for a long time. But there's still a fair amount of denial from people who don't want to believe, who are like, no, don't tell me that. I don't like that. That's not true. That can't possibly be true. And so there's never a point that we all come together beautifully. And so it's going to remain important for those who understand what's happening to hold the space for others to step into, even if it takes them 2 years, 3 years to step into that. And one of the things that I saw, and I've seen this several times as well, that the events that happen in December, in which the military steps up and says, boom, that's enough. You know, I think we talked about that the last time I was here. You know, nothing happens, nothing happens. There was no conclusion that could be drawn from the election. And it was messy. And they said, oh, we can't call it. Sorry. We have to keep going with what we've got. And so people were defeated. They were just defeated. There were a few people who were angry, a few people who said, yep, I knew this was going to happen. But a huge number, the bigger part of the population, felt like it was lost. It was over. And then nothing happened. And then right before Christmas, it looked like kaboom, the military stepped in. The Biden group was gone. And there was military law. What do you call that? Martial law. And people were thrilled about the martial law. I was like, what? And that, nobody knew what was going to unfold from there. But what I saw last night was, if that doesn't happen, because the whole thing is so dynamic and we're at crossroads, and the decision making is really important right now. People need to decide in their hearts and in their souls what they want, and it can't be political. It has to be, how do I want to live? And that'll push things one way or another. But if there is no military action between now and between the election and Christmas, then some serious confrontation start in 2023, and just gets worse over 2024, 25, 26.
Okay, so that's interesting. Penny, try to bring your speaker volume down a little bit. If you have your volume there on your keyboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit. I have a little bit of an echo from you.
Okay.
What was interesting just a couple of days ago, Zero Hedge, of course, they were reporting on this CPI, the Consumer Price Index, how it was absolutely horrible, brutal, a disaster for Democrats here leading into E-Day. And it was funny that their title was "It's Jover," and so I was like, okay, we've been getting that a lot. We've been getting that the eclipses here could be fatalistic in some sense, and that people could be removed or disappear from the scene very, very quickly here during these eclipses. Julie, recap a little bit here the time period that we're in now. Of course, we have the first eclipse here on October 25, and then the second one, these already come in pair, is on November 8th. So we're in that window now. And on top of that, you mentioned something on the last Astro Woo show for the prediction for this month, something about an alignment where we might have other world visitors here using a particular alignment to make their way to Earth right now. And it's funny because somebody in the chat just said, don't know if you're aware, JC, a very famous channel had a message from Archangel Metatron, the incredible soul who has Dolores Cannon, is coming back to Earth today, the 22nd. Okay, so that's another point of view there, but it seems to spell that, yes, we might be having to talk about something happening in this eclipse, not just here on Earth, but also from above. Julie, let's try to break that down a little bit here. Let me know what charts you want me to put on the screen also, if anything.
Okay. Well, you're right, exactly. So first eclipse is going to be on October 25th. It's going to be in the financial axis of Taurus and Scorpio. So the first one is going to be in the sign of Scorpio. And we're having the nodes of the moon in this financial axis for 1 year and a half. So meaning all or almost all of the eclipses we're going to have for that 1.5 year period are going to affect the financial system. So we're in this big transformation for 1.5 years. So the first one is going to be in Scorpio on October 25th. And that's where the South Node is, meaning that's where we're purging out everything that's dysfunctional about the way we've been dealing with money before. So Scorpio has to do with everything that's hidden, mutual finances, stock markets, central banking, anything that's been trying to make us poorer and enslaved to the matrix, basically. So with the help of this eclipse, we're going to purge out all of those dysfunctional topics. And what I found very interesting is that the planet Venus is going to be almost exactly eclipsed at the moment of this eclipse. So both the sun and the planet Venus are going to be eclipsed. And Venus in astrology rules currencies, money. So there could be something that has to do with banks going bankrupt because it's in the sign of Scorpio. It could also be a lack of liquidity because Venus rules money and currencies. Also, maybe we're going to see a currency disappear. That could be something like that. But on a more, let's say, positive side of things, Venus rules also love, right? Mm-hmm. So on a personal scale, I think a lot of people are feeling that we can feel, by the way, the energies of the eclipses almost a month before they happen. So we're already in the orb of influence. And a lot of people have noticed that relationship topics seems to come to the light because Venus also rules relationships. And we were sort of diving into Nostradamus prophecies with Jay Weiner on a previous episode on Beyond Mystic. And I decoded one of his quatrains, and he was talking about an alignment with Venus being eclipsed. And he was kind of saying in this book from Dolores Cannon, which is Conversation with Nostradamus, Volume 1. And yeah, so he was saying that the Cedars, or did he call it? No, he called it the Watchers.
The Watchers, yeah.
So he said the Watchers will be using this alignment to bring more love to the earth, but also use this sort of alignment to come to the earth, because Venus will be hidden behind the sun from our viewpoint here on earth. So a lot of things I think are going to happen. So I feel like this is all tying together, because yes, we're letting go of the dysfunctional topics on regarding our ways to use money, our past ways to use this money, and the way we've been enslaved through the system. So we're letting go, we're purging out. Scorpio rules toxicity. So anything that's been toxic, it could be a toxic relationship, but also a toxic relationship with our central banks. Yeah. So we're purging out, but also when we're infusing more love and more higher frequencies into this eclipse.
But think about the positivity of that. As scary as that may be for a lot of people here to think, oh my God, our whole world's going to change. I don't know if I'm going to eat tomorrow or pay my rent tomorrow. I totally get it. At the same time here, this purging effect in Scorpio to me is like, okay, we have these bad programs of scarcity running our frequency fields. And so instead of living in harmony and closer to our higher self, understanding the abundance nature of this planet, we're sorted into living into that scarcity and that survival mode. So imagine if even for half a second, humans remove that old program and tune into abundance, what we could create together. That would be absolutely amazing.
Well said.
Penny, your thoughts on this idea of maybe the Watchers? I know that Elena Denon just wrote a book. She's talking about the Cedars. There could be some historical connection between both those characterizations. You have obviously had some contact way back when, starting with the Book of the Robes and then up until today. What are you hearing if we take the conversation off-world right now? Is there any other happenings right now? Is there anything you can share right now with the audience members that could help us kind of glean here our connection to our star families and how they might be here helping at this time, because there's a huge transition right now, right in front of us. Penny.
Right now. Yeah. Yeah, what I can share is the encouragement. I'm not sure how to present this without patting myself on the back. So I'm a little bit shy. There was a point where the people that I was dealing with were saying it's too late, it's over. And we had a little bit of a squabble about that in a standoff for several years. And then then the attitude following that was kind of paternal, like, okay, support, she's working with us. We're referring to me. So don't give her a hard time. But it was this attitude of, we're just going to tolerate what she says. We don't think she's right, etc. But we're not going to walk away yet. And then long about June of, I think it was 2020, that was when I got the message that said, most of the message I shared was that the people who were here who were trying to get control had given up and they left. And the only one, remember me talking about that? The only ones left were the people who were earthlings, and they were going to try and pull it off themselves, and it wasn't going to work. And they were at that point just a tad more respectful. But the messages that I've gotten the last two connections were Hats off. By God, you guys are doing it. Don't stop now. Don't give up now. Don't back down. Don't, freak out, etc. We think you've got it covered, but there's a lot of work to be done. And it was the nicest.
It's like we're all engaged in this last minute, last hour Hail Mary. And what was funny, 107 was saying something to that effect also, because you just talked about the C word, which we can't talk about, but we can talk about the military being out in the open, as was suggested by the flag that Mr. T was just flying, and what Cliff High was predicting in the Web Data reports also, that eventually we would see this SOC operating in daylight, as opposed to now we all think we're separate, but we're all actually connected. But what Juan was saying was that for the military to do their thing, and the C word that you're talking about, they needed a number. And we were nowhere close to that number for the longest time. But apparently now, looking at some of the latest polls, we were at 81% of the people agreeing that we were going in the wrong direction, right? And if you look at some of the latest analysts that were on Greg Hunter's show, apparently the pretendency is actually closer to 11 or 12%, not 19%. So that would mean that we're closer to maybe 90% of the people now pushing that needle forward, giving maybe the last hurrah here for the people and our helpers and our friends to do the work that they're supposed to do here, to help us maybe level the battlefield. Not do it for us, but to help us maybe level the battlefield. Wow.
Right.
Okay. I won't press you for more, but I'll give you another opportunity. If there's anything else on that last connection you'll want to share with the audience member, we'll do that now. And if it's not appropriate to do it here, that's okay too. I don't want to press you there. I know this is
okay. Just that you used, I think you used a term, or you triggered in my mind the exact words they used. You have turned the corner. So that was really very encouraging for me.
Wow.
So,
okay. Yeah. Very good. Let's go back to Julie here. I was interested, again, you brought back the last series, or the series we just started with Jay Widener here on decoding Nostradamus and the vortex of time. Where do you want to bring some of Dolores's canon work and some of the last readings here in this conversation, Julie? How do you want to tie that in? And let me know which slide you want to bring up for the audience.
Well, I just discovered one new quatrain that I think Penny would be interested about. They were talking about the importance getting back to the earth. So he was talking about, which I think relates to this transit that we're having in Uranus and Taurus. Uranus being the revolution, and Taurus is everything that has to do with agriculture, earth resources, food resources, but also money. So while we're having Uranus in Uranus in I'm lost in the translation.
Want me to bring up 219? Which one do you want me to bring up, Julie?
The last one I sent you, I can't remember.
428. Let me bring this up on the screen here.
It's called the Green Revolution. No,
okay,
not
so
this
the previous one. Hold on a second here. It will be this one here. Go ahead.
No. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. Yes, thank you. So while we're having Uranus in the sign of Taurus, which is from 2018 to 2026, so it's about 7, 8 years. So Uranus is the revolution, and Taurus, as I said, is the earth resources, getting back in touch with the earth. So we're in the midst of this big revolution. And I just found this quatrain, which I think is very relevant to what we're talking about. So he called this one the Green Revolution, and still in the book from Dolores Cannon, because he helps decode his very... let's say, mystic language sometimes. So there's more precisions in this book. So it goes like this. So newcomers will build a place without defenses. So meaning the war is over because we don't need to put our energy building defenses because we're not at war anymore. We're a peaceful population. So basically people turning to peace and going back to the earth, which is all about Taurus energy. So and also, as we're talking now, the North Node is also in the sign of Taurus, indicating that we're in this big transformation for 1.5 years, and we're putting that much emphasis into the sign of Taurus, which is also getting back to the earth, changing our currencies, also Taurus, changing the way we make food, which is Taurus. So it relates a lot with astrology, I think. So second one, he said, occupying a place uninhabitable until then. So before then, it was we couldn't live there, but we're going to change that. And in the books, he explains that we'll be reclaiming land and making it good for crops again, and sometimes even destroying cities and trying to make it more rural for people to grow food even more. So third line, he said, meadows, houses, fields, towns will be taken with pleasure. So developing, and he explained in the book that we'll be developing new communities, which in astrology relates to the sign of Aquarius. And we all know that we're moving into this age of Aquarius, which is all about building communities. Aquarius rules system without a center. So meaning we're all connected together, and we're all sharing, and we're all distributing our resources, and we're all helping everybody to be more equal and abundant, but without any center. So it's peer-to-peer transaction, decentralized. So that's Aquarius. And lastly, he said, famine, plague, war, extensive arable land, meaning we'll be done with war, we'll be done with those things, and we'll move ahead respecting the earth. So, and then he said in the book, it will be a reversal of the trend of the 20th century, which was putting farmland under concrete for cities. In the 21st century, the trend will be in the other direction, the tearing down of cities to expose more growing land back to the sunlight.
Ooh.
So, yes.
Wow. There's a lot there, and that reminds me, Penny, of your book, Getting Well Naturally from the Soil to the Stomach. You've been at this for quite some time. How, reading from this Nostradamus passage here, does that correlate with a lot of your work and a lot of things you've been doing over the last decade to teach people about all of this? It appears to all be coming to fruition now because of the turmoil we have outside. Again, the silver lining in all of this change. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I love that quatrain. I mean, it gives me hope. It's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, and while you were reading it, I was thinking about in the look-see of October 10th. I had a piece in there about famine and how there was still time. But what I was seeing was people kind of having an attitude, a stubborn. It reminded me of this spunky kind of people who said, you know, you might have gotten this far, or you might have tried that, or whatever, but we'll take it from here. And they were coming together. They were working on things. They were growing things. There was no supply chain. And so a lot of stuff was broken down. A lot of creativity was needed, which I actually talked about in last night's look-see. And all of that, I'm going to say that understanding that we have let go of in terms of how to survive, how to heal ourselves, how to find water, how to grow food, how to process food, how to store food, and make sure you've got some for the winter or the period of time when it's either too hot or too cold or too dry to grow anything. All of that begins coming back. And I'm hoping, you know, that the Getting Well Naturally book will sort of be okay, here's a handbook for how to heal and what to be aware of in terms of how the world works. But that just touches what I thought were the high points that I wished somebody had told me when I was growing up. Some of it I observed in my grandparents and thought, why are they doing that? And then later it made sense. And other things I saw or witnessed that my parents and grandparents did. And so there's a bunch of us still alive that have connections or observations or little pieces of wisdom and know-how that will be used and built on as we move into the future. And people do come together next year. The loss of trust has just been devastating. People over the whole, since 1963, have lost their trust in one another. And so it's kind of become a what can I get away with sort of culture or economy. What can I lie about? What can I, if I can get away with it, then, tough, too bad for you, kind
Well,
of
the social contract has been broken, and even
thing.
more so in the last 2 years, where for the rest of the people who didn't know that, they realize that, oh yeah, something's broken. They're lying to me. And I think that's making a lot of people think, well, okay, what's
Yep.
next? What's the new social contract? Because clearly we can't continue going down this path. It's leading us towards
Yeah.
destruction. Andrew is saying, hey, Julie, can you speak about the full moon eclipse or the new moon
You.
eclipse on November 8th? Yeah, we'll get into that in
Yeah.
just a second here. Penny, but going back here to the food, I
Yeah.
saw something on Zero Hedge yesterday saying that, okay, the food shortages for 2023 are going to be absolutely worse than anybody had actually anticipated. This was Zero
I
Hedge
know.
2 days ago. What is your take on that? You and I have talked about this before. It's not going to be ubiquitous across the board, but we are going to see disruptions, and we do, for the love of God, ask people to try as best they can to divorce themselves from those big systems and at least get something started for themselves. Where are you on
Right.
that today, looking at the new info just coming out now?
It's a little bit worse than what I would like to see. We haven't quite turned that corner in terms of taking responsibility for feeding ourselves. But when I go ahead to 2024, everybody's working together, and the old systems of trust are being slowly reestablished. The old, because there isn't a lot of stuff on the grocery store shelves. And so that really makes a big difference. And what people discover is they don't want the grocery stores back again. They're realizing the difference between real food and factory food. There's a huge difference in terms of taste, in terms of nutrition, a lot of differences in terms of what I'm going to call the amount of work to get food. There's a whole rearrangement of the economy, and people are paying other people who know how to grow food to grow them. And so I just wrote an article for Llewellyn magazine, or for the I think it's the 2023 Moon Sign book, and it is the name of the article is your perpetual grocery store. Your garden is your perpetual grocery store. And so people, talk among one another. Well, where can we get this? Well, somebody in the group says, I think I'm going to try growing that. And he or his family or that group becomes a specialist in that one thing. And then there are groups who travel to go get food that can't be grown in their area, bring it back, and they sell it to everybody or share it with everybody. So the whole food system is going to undergo a big change in terms of food systems. I will say that when we went organic back in 1990 on our farm, that kind of network, who has organic strawberries, who has organic blueberries, who's raising organic carrots, who's got grass-fed beef and pork and chickens, who's got this, who's got that. And so we would travel the whole state and we would buy 50, 60, 80 pounds of blueberries all at one time, put them in the freezer. And that's the way that people are thinking about food in the future. How do I find somebody who's got it? Can I buy enough to eat, number one, and to store? And do I know how to store? And et cetera, et cetera. So lots of people doing lots of things that they never thought they would be doing. But the net effect of that is to bring people back together. And they begin working together in a way that we have long lost.
And that's a theme very much needed for sure. Let me switch gears, Penny, and talk to you about this. I think when you were last on the show, we talked about the monarchy, the Queen Lizard passing, and some of the old WebBot data reports that suggested that perhaps we would be introduced to 1, 2, and 3 new monarchs, one not lasting longer than the other. in that same vein, Truss just resigned the other day, and everybody's saying, "Wow, that's the shortest-lived prime minister position in quite some time." Now, we heard rumblings also that the doctors were saying to the kids to get ready that perhaps King Charlie was one heartbeat away from giving up the throne. What do you make of all that? Have you taken any look-sees about that also? What can you share with the audience members on that? And well, I'll ask Julie also, going back to the astrologer, maybe for November 8th also, and see how that all ties into these changes, big changes here on the monarchy side of things. Go ahead.
Okay. So last night, I never follow what's happening in the monarchy. It's like, that's another world. Maybe you guys do because you're in Canada, but I don't. And
I don't.
Not really. Not really.
Oh, okay. So what came out? This was number 35. King Charles is under great pressure to step down, or this is a choice. Was you either step down or be publicly arrested or even assassinated for his role in the Big C, weather warfare, and the climate scams. And I was like, oh wow, can I say that? So I put it in there. It's like, okay, well, I did not think about him that way. But when I went to look after that came up, it's like, okay, what's the scoop here? And it did look like he was not long for that monarchy. It's like, okay, this was nice. I'm retiring now. So, and that was like within the next few months. So I don't know who did you hear what you heard? Who would you hear that from?
That was the Webbot data stuff that had suggested that once the Queen would go, that we would be treated to maybe 3 reboots and one lasting less time than the previous one. So it was going to be like shorter and shorter lived as they introduced these replacements. So I thought it was interesting, but nobody can really explain what just happened to Truss, because in her press conference she says, "Oh, the Conservative Party had given me the mandate," and blah blah blah, and then she says, "I cannot fulfill the mandate because of Mr. P's illegal WAR thingy." I'm like, wait, that was already in place when you took the mandate, so there's nothing new. So I was sitting there as a reporter, okay, what changed? Why can you not deliver the mandate? What the hell's going on? So of course you and I know that the Bank of England just capitulated 2-3 weeks ago here, and that's created a huge problem in the bond market and in the pound sterling, and this is causing ripple effects across the board here, to the point where Credit Suisse also is getting $6 billion every week here from the Fed to try to keep him afloat. Let's get into that actually, Penny, because in a lot of your look-sees, you're talking about, as the eclipse here is suggesting also for October 25th, this huge financial shift, change, putting light on all the things hidden, the Scorpio purge, as Julie was talking about it. Now, we had talked about gold and silver. We've talked about crypto. Just in the news the other day, what was interesting, I think you and I had talked about this maybe a year ago, that the banks were already set up to introduce their crypto, but they hadn't done it yet. Well, just a couple of days ago here, crypto adoption continues. MasterCard to debut a product to help people buy cryptos, right? So this whole idea of having the old banking system trying to stay relevant in this change is right in front of your eyes now. But as we're seeing that, we saw that the Republican congressman introduced a bill to introduce a go-back Federal Reserve note in the States. There might be some issues with that, but just generally speaking, the idea of going back to sound money here seems to be very prevalent as we're purging these old systems of control. What can you share right now, Penny, whether that's a look-see or some of the past look-sees, about where we're going with gold and silver? And then I'll ask you the same thing for crypto as well. But let's start specifically for gold and silver now. Where do you see maybe gold and silver going, and what role are they going to play here in this transition?
Well, most of the gold and silver seems to be going over to China so that they can have a gold back yuan. And they are planning, I think they are planning to pull off that gold back, what would we call it, transition or changeover, to try to preempt the slowness with which the United States is moving in that regard. Gold and silver does start to go up, silver much more than gold. And the what looks like when I've looked at the system, it's like, okay, we've got like 4 different kinds of systems operating here, maybe 5 or 6. Depends on what you want to define as a quote system. But there's the old system sort of melts and is messy. And I think what I wanted was for it to die quickly. And what I was seeing was that the old banking system will die slowly through a series of ups and downs. It's going to crash. They're going to try and bring that sucker back up. And I was very disappointed to see that. And then that as the banks go down, they sell off to smaller banks, you know, who are like, woohoo, we get those customers. But then they discover they've been left holding the bag. And that's a big shock for them. The blockchain system is the next system. It takes a while for people to get that through their head. But once they get that under their belt, so to speak, then they're really not for the old banks, the old banking system at all. They really like the blockchain. The third banking system was barter, people cleaning out their attics because there's no supply chain. The big stores, like the Walmarts and does Kmart still alive? I'm not even sure. And Macy's and you know, those kinds of stores just can't get product. And so they go down, they have less and less and less and less. Walmart is probably one of the more resilient. They started working a long time ago with your local farmers, and they will revive that program in a second in order to survive. And then there's a whole system that's all this is very temporary, and it's all in flux and it's messy. But the gold and silver, the people who have gold and silver and who have been buying it are a system in themselves. What that looked like was a whole bunch of grandparents and parents who had enough sense to look ahead and buy some gold and silver. They were actually holding a lot of stuff together for their kids and their grandkids. And by the time they realized that they were the system, that they were holding everything together with the gold and silver transactions that they were doing, they were parsing that out very tight-fistedly. But once they realized, oh, it's us, we're the ones holding it together, by that time, the cryptocurrency systems have really come up and begun to be everywhere. Not the digital bank systems, but crypto systems.
Right. The decentralized here, and that's the fight we're going to be fighting here, of course. And while the old guard is trying to introduce their own decentralized version of it, we have to fight for the decentralized, and that's where the energy is moving. Guys, go check out this video that Rafi put out earlier today, Bon Mageddon. In there, he's saying exactly what Penny's saying here, that as this unravels, it is the silverbacks, the silver bugs, the grandpas and the grandmas here who accumulated that are going to be rebooting this economy with silver. It's the underlying pinning of all of this, because it'll take some time to reintroduce a quasi-gold-backed currency kind of economy. That takes some time, and in the meantime, silver is going to be playing the role here to exchange labor and to divide labor. So I thought it was a fascinating video. Guys, go check it out. And if you're looking at getting some silver, also I spoke to Andy. He's going to be back on the show, and I apologize, folks. We were supposed to have this video here with Bill Holter a couple of days ago. We had a scheduling conflict, so that will be now on October 24th, this Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to talk about why right now we have almost 100% premium in silver eagles and what's happening to the silver supply. So somebody in the world right now is front running what Penny and what the astrology is saying here, that something's about to change, and somebody's accumulating and draining physical silver from the COMEX, from the LBMA, the most rapid clip in history. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be at 3 p.m. on Monday. And in the meantime, yes, if you guys are looking for a silver, you can do so here at beyondmystic.net/silver. The 2022 Britannias are back. Oh no, sorry, actually these are the Maple Leafs. He's got here at 725 over spot, and also the kilo bars here at 350 over spot. That's wrong. I'm sure the there you go. I had to refresh. Okay, yeah, the Britannias are back. A lot of people were asking for these to get back on, so Andy's put it back on special, and also the gold Britannias here at 85 over spot. So again, beyondmystic.net/silver. Now, Penny, as we move into the crypto thing here, I got to address this one. In your last look-see, somebody picked that up and wasn't really sure what you were talking about, and it's none other than Cliff High. There was somebody in the chat.
I know, I didn't hear what he said. So
somebody says, "Are you going to ask about Cliff High's take on Penny Kelly's look-see on XRP?" Okay.
Okay.
Let me just preface this. I'm not pitting anybody against each other. We're having a conversation. And on this show, we've let people have their opinions about why they think XRP is going to be doing one thing in the future versus why they think it's not going to be doing that in the future. And we're all trying to figure this out together because there's a lot of mud and there's huge fog of woo in all of this. So, Penny, first off, the question, what you were describing in your look-see, in your mind, were you describing XRP or something unknown to you at the time? Let's start with that question.
It was basically unknown. It was just, cryptos. Okay. So it wasn't XRP specifically. So I rarely focus on a specific kind of crypto. So they're kind of all mushed together, even though they're not. In my mind, they're cryptos. Okay.
Okay. So let's ask also now, when you met the Robes and a little bit later on too, you had this idea back at the time of this weird money that didn't exist at the time, right? Share that and what you see in the context of the last look-see where you're saying, okay, we're going on this blockchain here, whether you guys want to or not. There's going to be a fight versus the decentralized and centralized components of that, but that is the way humanity is going, at least for now, perhaps until we get to know money, and that's where we're ultimately going, probably. Explain that to the audience members.
So let's see. I have pieces that are missing where I didn't see everything when I was with the Robes. But what I did see was that there was a period of time when the money was not physical. It was all on what I thought was television, was a computer screen. But back in, 1981, we didn't have the kinds of screens we have now. So, I noted that and thought, what are they doing passing money back and forth on television? What is that about? And then the next thing I saw was that it was a very refined system. Everything and all business and all transactions and all education was done on the internet. And the what I'll call the level of security, which is based on the level of trust between people, had skyrocketed. Right now, there's no trust and there's no security. And you put something on the web and poof, it's gone, or somebody's taken it, or trying to get into your accounts, or trying to fool you into something. That is not happening after we get past this initial stage of what I'll call the Wild West of economics. And then it moves to people don't bother with money. What they bother with are things. And so they run, instead of bookkeeping, they run these massive lists of what they own and when they bought it and how long they've had it and who made it and who knows how to repair it. And it's a whole different kind of system. It's more like if you were part of the maintenance department for a big factory, you would think that they might run this kind of thing. But every single family was running or keeping track of what they had, where it was, who had it, who made it, etc. And they were communicating in that way over stuff. But there was no money changing hands. People often ended up, I'm going to say, developing or creating something just because they loved it, because that was their thing. And then there were not a lot of people. And so they would have this extra thing, and they would put it out there and say, does anybody need this? And so then somebody would say, yeah, we could use that. We need that. We've been looking for that. Thank you. And there would be some sort of, I have these things if you want any of these in return. It was a very different kind of system. And
so in your view, we're still heading into this multipolar world of transaction and basically having the choice of transaction as opposed to the centralized version we're living in now.
What do you mean by multipolar world?
Like having many possibilities of how we choose to transact as opposed to the unipolar world of the Federal Reserve note or the petrodollar that is dying, that died in the spring, and we're about to have the funeral, as you said. That's what I mean about having many choices as opposed to that singular unipolar world view of the petrodollar.
There were circles, if I could call it that, circles of trade. A lot of stuff happening locally, and then if nobody in your local area needed or had what you needed, you would go in this next circle out, which would be a little bit bigger circle, and then the next one out, which might be regional, and then you might go to another region altogether to see did anybody there have what you needed. But yeah, there was a lot of, I'm going to call it, communication and travel that didn't take into, there weren't really any nations the way we have nations now. And so all of that business about you can't get into this country, or you can if you can sneak in, or you can this or that, or this one costs this much, or that one requires this much time. None of that was operational. People were communicating and visiting all over the globe. And the technology for travel was very high tech. But the life, the day-to-day life, very simple. Very simple.
Personally, I can't wait for the transporter pads so that you and I can go have lunch in Paris and then come back for dinner at the farm. That would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Before I change subjects, anything else you want to say about XRP before we go? Are you still in XRP, or is there anything you want to disclose to the audience members here? Everybody's asking where everybody's at, and I think it's just fair to be transparent. And again, we're just having conversations, and I really appreciate everybody in the chat being polite. We're just sharing ideas, and we all have different ideas of how this stuff is going to go. And if we don't talk about it like adults, we'll never find out the solution. So that's why this conversation is important. So Penny, anything else you want to share before we change the subject?
No, I don't really have anything else, but I'm curious about what is the interest in XRP? Yeah, I have some. I think I've told this story twice now about discovering that my wallet was buying it every week and I didn't know it. So I've got quite a bit of it. And so that's, whatever. We'll see what it does. I'm not worried about where any of the crypto is going to go, and I'm not attached to any particular outcome. I watch, and when I see which way the energy is going, I either get on board or say, and here you go, you want this?
Well, let's talk about that. Surfing the energies, Julie. Knowing the astrology and where these energies are pushing us and nudging us really helps us. And as Penny was saying here, we have to stay nimble right now. We can't be attached to the old. That's the kiss of death. We have to be ready to embrace the new and to know deep inside of us where and when we need to make those moves for ourselves, for our loved ones, for our families, and all that. Let's get into the astrology a little bit here. We're already at the hour mark. November 8th, so this last eclipse here. Explain that to the audience members. How are we collectively going to see those energies perhaps manifest? We're looking at these archetypes here. We're already in the orb of influence, but of course, we have a big E-Day coming up around that as well. How do you see all of this playing out, energetically speaking, here with the alignments?
I'm just going to share my chart. It's going to be easier, but so this is a chart for November 8th. I just want to show you how interesting it is on this birth chart. So we're having, it's a full moon to start with. So the moon is exactly opposing the sun, as you can see here. And because it's so close from the north node, it's making it an eclipse. So that's going to be a very powerful eclipse. So it's a full moon eclipse in the sign of Taurus. And as you can see here, we're looking at the moon to know at what degree it is. So it's 16 degree of Taurus, and exactly conjunct we have the planet Uranus, which is the planet of big surprises. So I just want to call this eclipse expect the unexpected kind of time. So it promises, well, usually eclipses are kind of a curveball that universe throws at you, but added the extra value of Uranus, it's going to be highly difficult to exactly predict what's going to unfold at this time, especially being an important date in the US, right? So this one's going to be interesting. And because it's a full moon eclipse, so meaning we're closing a cycle during a full moon eclipse in a sign of Taurus, which is food, which is money, resources, but let's not forget it takes into account the whole axis, the whole financial axis, because the sun will still be with Venus in the sign of Scorpio. So we're still trying to get rid of, let's say, the powers that were, the powers that be, all the corruption that's being hidden from us, that's Scorpio. So that's still in the energies, of course. And as you can see here, Uranus at 16 degrees is almost exactly squaring still Saturn. So it's kind of like one of the hardest alignments in astrology. We call that a T-square. So two bunch of planets being opposed and pointing to like an arrow, which is very like the highest amount of tension you can have in astrology, almost. The other one being a grand T-square if we had another point here. So Saturn is going to be the focal point for this eclipse that just turned direct. So Saturn is going to be in full force. So Saturn is the planet of control. Also, we can see distribution problems. We could see more censorship because it's in the sign of Aquarius. A lot of corruption to be expected around this particular date, this particular event in the US. So I agree with Penny. I'm not sure there's going to be a fruitful event, let's just say it like that. And if there is an event, I think it's going to be highly corrupted because of this Saturn influence there. And because of Uranus, again, I feel like I'm trying to think of what could happen, but Uranus always brings the unexpected. So I think it's going to be very interesting. And also Uranus being the planet of revolts. So we could see a lot of social unrest around this date. Maybe it's going to help awaken even more people because Uranus is also the planet of awakening. What else? We were talking about cryptocurrencies. It's interesting because Uranus in Taurus speaks directly to cryptocurrencies because Uranus is the planet of technology and Taurus is the sign of currencies. So there might be also something coming up about cryptos that's going to be around those eclipses, specifically more around this eclipse of November 8th. So also we could see something very drastic happening with resources and currencies because, again, of this Uranus. I know Penny was talking about this coup. I don't know if I'm supposed to pronounce that word or not, but it made me think of this planet Uranus, which is all about revolution and all about sudden and very unexpected events. Oops, sorry. JC, you're muted.
Hold on. What was interesting about that also in this particular written format, you had talked about these two paths, and Penny was on this also for a while. The choice to reconnect with nature or with the inorganic environment. So that too, like our natural economy versus the systems of controls that we have now. Looking at this and the alignments, Penny, for November 8th, anything striking to you as well that you want to share with the audience members?
One of the things in last night's look-see was that people were finally beginning to understand that the New World Order was the transgender, was the was that whole order, and was the transhumanist order. And that begins to break down. So I don't know if that's in the stars or in the astrology, but it doesn't fly. It's like there's been this little wave of transhumanism. It's actually been a pretty big wave when I think about it. And they got quite a distance, but they're not going to succeed. So they are hitting the wall now. That is beginning to break down. That's one of the things that I thought was like, oh wow, for that to come up. I never think about the transhumanist agenda, but the steady awakening of people in every direction is no, thank you, go away.
Yeah.
And for all of us who have been studying this and researching for a while, we just had a collective sigh of relief. Thank God, this far, no farther, please.
Yeah. And if I can add to that, transhumanism and astrology is Aquarius, because Aquarius can deal with technology, so very advanced technology. So this is where I wrote two paths open up for us as a humanity. So the chance to either go along with that transhumanism path, which is using technology but to disconnect from source, right? And the other path of Aquarius would be to connect,
embrace
even more
the angelic nature of humanity.
Oh wow, that's well said.
I just channeled that live, believe me.
Wow.
I was begging to scream that. Somebody was screaming in my ears. Check this out today. If astrology is about the time and our relationship with time, then Saturn direct this weekend is the strike of the hour. Time to get serious. Yes, indeed. We're all feeling it in the energies. While I have you on the screen, we're almost there. Julie, any last words of wisdoms here before we go tonight? Anything that you're seeing on maybe how the people watching the show today can maybe help appease some of those frantic and dread energies in their friends and families right now? What would you suggest to them? And also talk about how we can support you at maisonjupiter.com and those amazing products you have here of the personalized birth charts as well.
Well, I'll just start by saying I watched Penny's latest look-see on, I think it was October 15th, the date. I think it was a truly amazing video. You explained it really well. I think how we're going to manage all of those, let's say, financial timelines all at the same time. You talked about those three systems being used all together at the same time. I thought it was brilliant. And as far as the astrology goes, I think it's talking about this, again, Uranus and Taurus, which is money, which is resources, which is currencies, and Uranus until 2026 is in that sign. So we're changing everything. So because the North Node is moving with Uranus in the sign of Taurus until mid-2023, it talks about this big emphasis on cryptocurrencies being our, let's say, collective future way of trading. So I think Penny touched on that video. So I think this is going to be, well, astrology at least is telling us that this is probably going to be the main way to trade moving forward. But since then, Taurus relates to anything that's solid, silver, gold, anything that's decentralized, which is Uranus. Taurus talks about land, property, anything that's solid that you can hold into your hands, any resources. So I thought that was brilliant, and I made all the connection with the astrology, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, it makes sense. So I think it's a matter of just being smart and making sure that we're prepared in all those categories, which is, let's say, metals, food, cash, a little bit of cryptos. So I don't think it's going to be a, let's say, apocalypse that's going to happen in just one day. So it gave me hope also that's not going to be as probably as let's say negative or apocalyptic as I thought maybe. So I think we're going to get there. It's going to be an adaptation for sure.
Okay, very good. And talk about these birth charts for people who want to have a leg up here on how their astrology is affecting their lives and how maybe they can hedge a little bit and better navigate their world.
Yeah, so on maisonjupiter.com, there's the personalized birth chart. So you can choose the color of your choice. It's your own poster with your own birth chart. Well, the planets exactly where they were at the moment of your birth. So it's like your blueprint for this lifetime on Earth, to really understand where those transits affect you and what house, let's say, the eclipse is going to affect your life, what's going to be activated in your own birth chart for every astrological event that we're talking. So this is like something you're going to refer for your whole life if you want to really move with the energies, be in the flow. And it comes with a report, which is like 15 to 20 pages explaining all your planet placements at birth.
Well, very good. I have my own report that I've printed and bounded, and I keep looking at it, and I keep learning about myself. So very interesting product, guys. Check it out at maisonjupiter.com. And you can also find Julie and her videos on Maison Jupiter here on YouTube. Please remember to go like, share, and subscribe. Penny, last words of wisdom. First of all, is there anything else in the look-sees that we forgot to talk about that we must share with the audience before we go? And then let's try to end this note on, hey, I know we're at the last mile here. Some of us are long in the tooth in this spiritual war, but we're very close, as your friends were saying here. And this is very, very good news, but we can't let up. We have to keep pushing that needle forward collectively and individually. What would you say to that, Penny?
I would say right on. Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a couple things that I would share. There's some things that I'll leave out just so that you have something when you go see the look-see. It's not all old news, but I think there are two things that I would share. One was that Taiwan came up, and I was listening to all the rhetoric about, oh, there's going to be a war, there's going to be a war. So I went to see the war, and nothing happened. And so I ended up looking at that, and I moved ahead, and I moved ahead, and I moved ahead, and I got into next spring. And I didn't think there was any kind of war. That looked like there were a couple of false flags that the U.S. tried to start a war, but they didn't go. And China looked like it had decided they would fight if they had to. But that wasn't their first choice. Their first choice was that they were going to I'm going to say it this way. They were going to choose patience, and they were going to get a relationship going with Taiwan that was beautiful, and they were going to do that using semiconductors. And they had chosen the patience because the election that we're going to not have on November 3rd, on November 8th, E-Day, that didn't happen. And what they knew from that point was that the U.S. hegemon was no more, and that the currency, the U.S. dollar, was about to be replaced as the world's reserve currency. And their thought was, why fight? They're shooting themselves in the foot. They're killing themselves. They're destroying themselves. We'll just wait. And in the meantime, we'll build this relationship with the, semiconductor industry, and they're going to love us because we're going to buy everything they can make. So that was what I saw last night. And then today, I saw a brief video, and it talked about the fact that the U.S. just ordered all of the people in China who are working in semiconductors, all the U.S. citizens living and working in China in the semiconductor industry, you either quit your job immediately and come home, or you lose your U.S. citizenship. And it seemed like there was some other threat coupled with that. I'm not sure if that was a taxation kind of thing or what it was, but I thought, what I saw last night is probably correct. The U.S. itself in the foot, destroying its own. We can't have, they decided they weren't going to buy semiconductors from China. Well, we don't have any semiconductor plants, even though they're talking about building one over in the coast somewhere. And I thought, stupid. China is probably not going to invade Taiwan. They're just going to what is that they call it? You can catch more flies with honey than with
Yeah,
vinegar.
and with vinegar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I was the other thing I saw that I think is worth mentioning is that it looked like Google and Twitter. They appeared like this giant donut with this absolutely empty center. There was nothing in the center. And I thought, what happened? It looked like they had been hollowed out. That was the term I used to describe what I saw. They were hollowed out. And I thought, where'd all the people go? They didn't have any people. So I don't know what, and I put a quote in the new look-see that came from George Gilder, who wrote Life After Google some years ago, which I remembered when I saw that scene last night and thought, uh-oh, I think Google.
Well, between Kanye West wanting to buy Parler, between Elon Musk getting Twitter, and of course Truth Social, we might be at that critical stage in humanity, even for a crack. If we open up and we remove this censorship machine, imagine the reality that most of us can work together if we can actually share ideas and use the real words. Can you imagine how incredible a world we can create together if we can talk about the real things and we're not censored?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And, living in a pretend fantasy woke. I can't even say the words, but you know what I mean. So, well, Penny, thank you so much for all of this. Guys, if you want to follow along with Penny's work, you can find her here at consciousnessonfire.com. Penny, you just launched your latest book. Is it here? Yes, I have it here, The Revival. Let's talk about that quickly before we go. What's in this book? Why should people invest in their own future here?
That is a handbook for moving forward into a whole new world. It's not a bunch of stories. It's a whole bunch of questions regarding each sector of our universe: medicine, government, education, science, the arts, money, business, planets, solar systems, ETs, all that kind of stuff. And there are questions. You read a little bit about what's been happening in that sector of our world, and then you answer all these questions about how to think and how to see what have you contributed to that new world, or to the old world, and what could you contribute to the new world. So it goes with the planet Earth. I think there's another book right behind it. The Planet Earth is the first one in that series. The Revival is the second one. And the next one is going to be about my journeys to the New Earth and other places that have served as this kind of oh, wow, we could do that. Why don't we do that?
Right. I love it. And of course, if we're all collectively charged to get together and create this new world, one of our first steps to do that is recreating ourselves, getting rid of all of these limited programmings. And how do people do that here? You have a lot of offerings here on your patreon.com/Penny Kelly. You have these Tea and Consciousness, where you talk exactly about that, how to become a better version of yourself. What can people expect here on Penny Kelly on patreon.com?
I think, well, the YouTube, I'm on YouTube too. The look-sees are on there. I do a tarot reading once a month that just says, okay, here's 2 or 3 important questions for our world. And then, look at what are the cards telling us about this situation or this aspect of our world. Then I teach classes, and I'm really excited. I think Daphne is working on it, has been working on it, putting together the new Intuition 1 and 2 classes that people will be able to buy at any point instead of waiting in line forever to try to get in classes that are already full.
And those you're going to have those on Patreon, the classes?
No, those are going to be on a totally separate platform that is, you want to take the class, you just go in and sign up and buy it, and it's yours. Download
Perfect.
it.
But you're not ready to announce that yet, or do you have a website you want to share with the audience today?
Not quite yet.
Okay.
We're in the process.
It's a lot of work putting all this stuff together.
Oh
So
my
guys,
God.
be patient. But in the meantime, yes,
Yeah.
you can find Penny at pennykelly.com, and also, of course, on her Patreon. High Beta, I believe, is the package where you get most of the information you're needing there, including all of the tea and
That's right.
consciousness. I love you guys. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Penny, for sharing all of your wonderful insights. Thank you to all the audience members watching today. Let us know how we did. Did you like this episode? Leave us a comment below. And if you like the show, please hit that like button. It really helps us because sometimes it's not easy being out here, as you guys may or may not know. All right, guys, stay tuned. The next week here, it could be absolutely interesting. So hold on to your wits and stay in the love frequency. And know that you are protected. And if you're watching these shows and you've done the work, you're already on the right path. And I know it could be scary, but you have to look deep down in yourself to know that we're exactly where we're supposed to be, and everything is going to be okay. I love you guys. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.
Okay. Hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto.